Welcome back to Fundamentals of Flipping. In our last episode, we talked about the magic sauce that makes the flipped property stand out, the small design decisions and the emotional touches that help sell a home quickly and sometimes above market value. But before you can renovate a property, before you can stage it, before you can create that emotional connection for buyers, you have to do one thing first. You have to find the deal. And this is where many new investors get stuck. They spend months scrolling through listings online. They attend open houses. They analyze properties, but they never actually pull the trigger. Today, we're going to talk about how to find your flip and how to know when a property is actually worth pursuing. The biggest mistake beginners make, one of the biggest mistakes new flippers make is believing that the perfect deal will suddenly appear. And they think that there's some magic listing that everybody else has missed. But in reality, is that successful? And this is where many new investors get stuck. They spend months scrolling through listings online, they attend open houses, they analyze properties, but never actually pull the trigger. Today we're going to talk about how to find your flip and how to know when a property is actually worth pursuing. One of the biggest mistakes new flippers make is believing that the perfect deal will suddenly appear. They think there's some magic listing that everyone else has missed. But the reality is that successful investors don't wait for perfect deals. They learn how to recognize opportunity. Are you willing to take on a project that needs a good roof? Or are you willing to take on a project that needs a new roof? Or does that scare you away? Does an old furnace turn you off? Does a wet basement make you want to run the other way? Does the idea of changing all the windows in a house make you break out in hives? The more you're willing to take on, the better your chances of getting the property under contract. The more you're willing to tackle, the more negotiating room you have too. I was interested in a house that was listed close to top of the market, yet it needed a ton of work. Once I demonstrated that the other houses in the area listed at that price had newer furnaces, newer windows, updated kitchen, and bathrooms, I countered $30,000 under list and I got it under contract in no time. Another property I looked at came with a seller's disclosure of the presence of lead paint. A lead paint mitigation company had included a complete report accompanied by a quote for $8,000. Now, I know that $8,000 isn't a lot for lead paint mitigation. The report pinpointed the exact areas that had lead paint. So we went in and tested those very areas, finding that none of them actually had lead paint. But I didn't let the seller in on my. Now I know that $8,000 isn't a lot for lead paint mitigation. The report pinpointed the exact areas that had lead paint. So we went in and tested those very areas, finding that none of them actually had lead paint. But I didn't let the seller in on my findings. Instead, I negotiated a price reduction equal to the quote. There were some other issues that they were unaware of, like the fact that some of the radiators weren't working and couldn't really be replaced, meaning that the entire heating system had to be changed. That property, I got $26,000 under list. So, where do good flipping opportunities come from? There are several places investors commonly find them. The first place is the MLS. Many beginners assume that all the good deals are gone by the time they reach the MLS, but that's not always true. Sometimes sellers simply want to move quickly. Sometimes properties have been sitting on the market because buyers aren't intimidated by the renovation work. For an investor who understands the numbers, those properties can be great opportunities. Another common source of deals is wholesalers. Wholesalers specialize in finding distressed properties and then assigning those contracts to investors. I worked with a wholesaler who knew not only the market like the back of his hand, but he knew that renovating is all about. He actually became my mentor. He figured out that if he helped me, I would continue to buy from him, and he was right. My wholesaler deals came with septic inspections, real area comps, and were available for a quick purchase. He even arranged for bridge funding when necessary. He made it easy, and he knew his stuff. Once you find a property that looks promising, the next step is running the numbers. This is where many beginners get into trouble. They fall in love with the house before they analyze the deal. But successful investors always start with the numbers. you need to understand three key things. First, what the property will be worth after renovation. This is often called the after repair value, or ARV. Second, how much the renovation will cost. And third, what will your total investment be once you include the purchase price, renovation costs, financing, and selling expenses. Once you subtract those costs from the expected sale price, you can estimate your potential profit. If the numbers don't work, we'll move on. Another important factor when evaluating a flip is the neighborhood. Even a beautifully renovated house can struggle to sell if it's priced far above the surrounding properties. That's why it's important to look at recent sales in the area. These comparable sales, often called comps, give you a realistic idea of what buyers are willing to pay. If similar homes in the neighborhood are selling for $250,000, it's unlikely that a renovated property will sell for $350,000. Understanding the local market helps you avoid overestimating the value of a project. When you walk through a potential flip, try to look beyond the current condition of the house. Instead, focus on its potential. Can walls be opened up to create better flow? Is there room for an additional bathroom? Could the kitchen layout be improved? These types of improvements can significantly increase the value of a property. And at the same time, pay attention to major systems. Check the roof. Look at the furnace and the water heater. Consider the condition of the electrical and plumbing. These items can affect your renovation budget. The more houses you walk through, the easier it becomes to recognize what a property needs. One of the biggest obstacles for new investors is waiting too long. They analyze property after property but never make an offer. They're afraid of making a mistake. But real estate investing is something you learn by doing. Your first flip will never be perfect, and that's okay. The goal is to start with a project that has manageable risks and a clear potential. Once you complete your first flip, your confidence and experience will grow quickly. What about building relationships? Another important part of finding deals is building relationships. Real estate agents, wholesalers, contractors, and other investors can all become valuable sources of opportunities. The more people you connect with in the industry, the more deals you'll hear about. Many great properties never even reach the public market. They're sold through a network of investors who share opportunities with each other. Finding your first flip might seem overwhelming at first, but once you understand where deals come from and how to evaluate them, the process becomes much clearer. Remember, successful flippers focus on three things: finding properties with potential, running the numbers carefully, and understanding the market where they're investing. In our next episode, we're going to talk about a topic that stops many new investors before they even begin: how to finance a flip, even if you don't have a lot of cash, because the truth is, there are more financing options available than most people realize. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy flipping.